Yeah, I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just catapulting towards some greater purpose?
Pampered fat cats with bloated ego. We are the only DJ crazy enough to tattoo Jackie Brown on his ass.
This is Michael Mann, and I ride with
Extended Clip.
Welcome to Extended Clip. It is episode 445, and I'm one of your hosts, Eddie Averill.
I'm Malcolm Baum.
I'm JT White.
And this week, we are concluding our back-to-back, would you even call it a miniseries? It's just like a double-header, a duology. Not quite a double feature, because they were separated by an episode. But our 2-week stretch of looking at Mike Leigh here on the main feed of Extended Clip with his classic from 1996, Secrets and Lies. This is a movie that is comprised of an ensemble of a lot of his regulars, you know. You got Brenda Blethyn, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, Timothy Spall. Leslie Manville eventually gets discarded by this movie about 40 minutes in. But she pops up for a bit, and it's a really fantastic, slow-forming family drama that, now that I'm thinking about it, its structure really reminds me of the films of Ozu.
Oh, this is the life, ain't it? Yeah.
And how generational differences come into play, and how class differences can come into play sometimes as well. This one much more than almost any Ozu movie, of course. But regardless, those differences such as age and class, how people work through them, and these slow-building family dramas that have their apexes that work only because of the accumulation of detail that you get in smaller scenes over the 2+ hours that leads to that giant climax of a barbecue, you know? The general outline of this story here, you know, you have Cynthia, who recently, or at least somewhat recently, lost her own mother, and she lives with her adult daughter who works as a street sweeper, and they're very working class, and her brother, her younger brother, has done quite, you know, decently well for himself, and he has a nice place with his wife, who kind of holds him in contempt. Meanwhile, Marianne Jean-Baptiste's character, Hortense, just lost her mother, but it's her adopted mother, and she came from more of a bourgeois family, her adopted family, that is, and she became an optometrist, but after the passing of her mother, wants to seek out her birth mother, who is, of course, Cynthia, who had, you know, she couldn't believe it at first, but after racking her memory, did have one illicit affair with an African-American gentleman, because, of course, race is as much of a big deal as generation or class difference in this movie, with Marianne Jean-Baptiste being the one black character entering the white family that essentially abandoned her at birth, despite the fact that the black family that adopted her was much better for her, probably. And it just becomes this, like, extremely complicated text that builds up into such a profound release and catharsis. And Mike Leigh's process, which we discussed on the last episode with Naked, is so integral to how this film in particular works, of the Mike Leigh movies I've seen, with his extended improvisatory rehearsals with these actors to dig into their character backstories and figure out the way they talk, which leads to him properly writing the films. I just feel that the density of character work here is so massive and contributes so much to what could be an overblown melodramatic third act in almost any other filmmaker's hands, you know, besides, like, I'm trying to think of who could pull this off, and I think of, like, my favorite guys, like Paul Thomas Anderson could pull this off, you know, but at the same time, I feel the structure is most closely related to Ozu. And it's funny, this is a movie I tried to watch like 9-10 years ago when I first tried watching Mike Leigh. And after like 30 minutes, I was like, yeah, I can't get into this. And just, I don't even think I logged it. I was just like, it's not for me. And then this time, like a decade later, I was just like fucking completely bowled over by it. But in the opposite way that Naked did. Naked gripped me with its disgusting nature from its opening, frames of assault, and lured me into this underbelly of society, whereas Secrets and Lies, just, I loved living in it. I was content to live in it, despite the fact that it feels 9 hours long at some points. And that all just culminates so well. That cumulative effect isn't going to happen at the end if the film doesn't kind of feel 9 hours long at some points, which maybe for some people it doesn't, but for me it kind of does. But again, it ends up being a positive thing. JT, Malcolm, whoever wants to go first, how did you guys feel about this movie?
Yeah, I loved it. Again, especially as I had said in the previous episode, I did the double feature today of Naked and then Secrets and Lies. Letting the world of Secrets and Lies like kind of wash over me was such a pleasant, like I really needed that upper there. Yeah, I don't know. He does it in a way that like is so like the characters are so richly constructed that like I don't know, just it makes the big melodramatic like sticking points really land and not feel strained. Mm-hmm. And he's able to like just get so many like just impressive things out of the actors. Like the first when the reveal happens that Hortense is Cynthia's daughter there, and it's just like that incredibly long shot of them like sitting at the diner. That's just incredible.
Yeah. Diner scene of their true like settling into their reunion after meeting and being in disbelief and denial outside of the subway station is the high point of the film for me. I mean, it is just an unbelievable. The only filmmaker that really came to mind was Hong Sang-soo, and how the stillness of a long take rather than a showy tracking take or whatever. The camera just plopped there with two people sitting at a food and beverage establishment, getting to a point of emotional catharsis, like in real time, with that amazing of dialogue. Hong is the only person I could think of, and this like kind of upstaged a lot of what I've seen from Hong, that scene at least.
Yeah, I just because like I don't know, like there are points like when watching the movie, I would like sort of take a step back and be like, oh wow, the mechanics of this are very like melodramatic, just like every family member kind of having a problem to have to like work through, so to speak. And I was just like, and I mean, not that like feeling the melodrama at any point is like bad, because there's certainly like great like filmmakers like Cirque that like really lean into that and like really like are trying to maybe not over, but like really try and hit a note when they're like emphasizing a dramatic point. And just the naturalistic like acting and the way he gives these events the room to like breathe and unfold, like that scene in particular, just watching it happen in real time like feels like witnessing the real thing there. And it's just so moving, and it's just like I had that at various points in the movie where it's just like, oh wow, despite like again the melodrama of it all, like he's able to just get such beautiful, true performances out of everyone.
That's what's kind of the magic elixir of this movie is kind of, it is rooted in like, family melodrama, classic film subject. But, the lengths he goes to have realistic characters and have these conversation scenes be the actual length of a real life conversation, and kind of integrating that realism, even the way it's shot, kind of like a lot of like great conversations by windows with kind of like this natural light kind of pouring in. Like you guys are saying, it is, the melodrama is earned, because like with everything, there's like good and bad versions, and bad melodrama can just be very grating, whereas this one, the best melodrama, you're crying right along with the characters. And I think like that movie kind of definitely gets you there, just because having the feeling of really knowing who these characters are, and kind of the great acting details that these the actors bring to it. And I didn't know about Leigh's process until you mentioned it on the show, and that's I just that just I think that's a good move if people weren't doing that before. Like I think I gotta give credit to his process, but I feel like I can't help but take that info and apply it to what I've seen, and like there's just certain layers of acting within these scenes that even in some other great movies, they're not quite as layered, where it's not only what they're saying, but like kind of like the small kind of brief looks that they give each other, or kind of share in their own silence. It's just you feel every single aspect of the character, and it's and it has some formal decisions to help emphasize that, as it's very well shot by Dick Pope.
Oh yeah, I mean, Dick Pope's cinematography here, the image itself is never flashy, which I would say in comparison, Naked has some like money shots in it, This one though, like the use of the long take here, some of them you just plop it down. Some of them it's like kind of discreetly intricate camera direction. Like when the barbecue starts, it's like a weird crane shot that goes back and forth, left and right a little bit, just to catch everybody in the frame, And then there's some great scenes that are just like hallway scenes where Pope and Leigh divide the frame with walls and doors. And the way that Leigh can kind of geometrically divide the frame, him and Pope as his regular DP, is really astonishing to me, and something I'm surprised I didn't catch on to when I first tried to get into his movies, because it's a visual tendency that I've always been drawn to. One of my favorite character arcs in this is that of Maurice, or Morris, the family portrait photographer, the younger brother of Cynthia, who, he has a strained relationship with his wife, and he also has a strained relationship with his sister, where it's like he's clearly kind of helping her out financially. He stuffs her a couple $100 or whatever for the leaky upstairs ceilings and stuff, and he tries to be the cool uncle to Cynthia's daughter and stuff like that. But there's very clearly so much resentment there between his wife and the two other women in his family, and yet she's not some rolling pin hen. Mike Leigh wouldn't do that. Like
some nag wife. No.
Yeah, like no, Monica's like a great character, very like sensible, and clearly wants to just like, especially with what's revealed later on about her inability to have children. And of course that just compounds this adoption saga's melodrama. But like the fact that she just wants the best domestic life she can have without being able to have children is like something that reaches me. Like it just evokes a lot of sympathy from me, like it produces a lot of sympathy in me. And despite the fact that like the film almost lures you into thinking she's almost like the bad guy of the family, when there's no bad guys here. This is a real story of how families, no matter how broken they can be, can operate and can potentially reconcile. And it's really a tough watch, honestly. Like, I don't know. I really definitely wasn't emotionally ready for it when I was a teenager, which is probably part of why I put it off. But now that I've had these experiences of, losing so many family members and living both a working class independent existence, a more stable independent existence, and a living under my dad's roof existence, all as an adult, like those trials and tribulations and those of the characters of Leigh and the way he puts them through the ringer, not sadistically, but just in the way that life does, registered on such a deeper level in this. And particularly, it's funny, I singled out Maurice as my favorite character, but his sensitivity towards women is like clearly that of, one of the greats in that department. And the way that he works with actresses has to be part of that, like I think that is what comes out of his process more than anything, is that it's hard to think of another like male filmmaker, I guess, that writes women as sensitively as he does. And so he is the son of Gear of the year already, calling the shot. He's the Dr. T who
loves women. He truly loves women.
No, but between this and Hard Truths, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, that 1-2 of those two performances, like, 25 years apart, but the first two I've seen of their collaborations, I was like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, this is some powerhouse stuff. This is some all-time level stuff I've been missing out on.
I think I gave a light chuckle there, not knowing you're talking about Leigh. I thought you called Maurice one of the great respecter of women, which, he is in a sense. Kind of, because it is, I feel like that character is not, it's not one that we see, because he's kind of like almost kind of like the straight man, almost maybe like the Jason Bateman of, Arrested Development, not really an apt comparison there, but no. We're going to recast this all with American television stars. Jason Bateman will be playing Morris. Do you got any? Who's Cynthia?
I mean, we could just go straight Arrested Development. Cynthia is the late great Jessica Walter. Roxanne is, of course, Hortense is Portia de Rossi, and Roxanne is Aaliyah Shawkat.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
We're just going full Arrested.
That's a good lineup.
Full Arrested Development. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's give this family some money and see. The antics might never stop. That's what I was thinking when the movie ended.
Now I'm just thinking of the climax of the movie where he says the title and he goes, can't we share our misery? And then you just hear Ron Howard say, no, they couldn't.
True. This movie is great, but a Ron Howard voiceover, that's kind of hard to refuse. People, I know there's been some big 13 Lives fans out there. Some people are giving him credit for his directorial work, but his work as a voiceover artist is unparalleled.
Is 13 Lives, people were saying that had some 15-17 to Paris-esque qualities.
True. I guess that I don't think any of us took the plunge, but maybe there's a 5% chance that requires further investigation.
The plunge. Oh, boy. I love the scene of Marianne Jean-Baptiste going to like the Hall of Records after she meets with Leslie Manville. And Leslie Manville's scene when she sets her up with the info is incredible. Yeah. Like she's just such a wonderful presence on screen. But then the character of Hortense, like going to the Hall of Records, it's like she's in a fucking detective movie investigating herself, with that classic shot of like the never-ending Hall of Records that's all in red. It's just very dramatically shot throughout in a way that's like understated, but once in a while you get these crazy compositions that are often revealed to be Maurice's point of view. Like there's one shot at a wedding that's like especially with the new restoration, because I remember I had a file of this forever and I was like, this looks like dog shit, and it was an old DVD, an old British DVD, Now it has a Criterion 4K restoration, or maybe 2K. The shot from Maurice's point of view at the wedding when he's in the back row and he doesn't even have his tripod out yet is like he's in Kubrick vision, Like, and there's a couple shots of Maurice or from Maurice's perspective that are like very decadent in the way that they're shot, and the way that they're lit particularly. But a lot of that is, I guess, to imply that Maurice's eye is that talented, The guy who sold him the business kind of accuses him of throwing away his artistic talents to, just run this photo studio, and clearly exposes himself as just being bitter and poor within the same sentence in a fantastic scene that comes later on.
With the Maurice character, again, like, I don't want to read into it too much, not knowing the full depth of Mike Leigh's filmography, but it does, like, especially like photographer stuff, anytime something like that is in like a movie, you oftentimes, I feel like, oh, is this more of the filmmaker's perspective, like an insert character? And it does feel like, I mean, he's worked with, like, again, obviously the film is full of people he's worked with a lot, but Timothy Spall plays Maurice, and he's in, like, I don't know, Mr. Turner is a Mike Leigh movie I've seen the poster for a lot when it was coming out. Him hitting the big brush pose. And that does feel like, again, Painter, another potential for Spall as like a Leigh insert character. I'm just gambling the auteurist dice here, and I'm going to see what comes up in further investigation.
There's a great scene with Hortense and like her friend, just to kind of get more acquainted with her early on. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the pacing. Like, a lot of other films in their dramatic structure would not have this scene of Hortense and her friend having lunch and it looks like drinking wine maybe with lunch in like what looks like 8 a.m. sunlight, though. It was weird the way that scene is lit. It looks like they're maybe having breakfast and drinking, but
these
I
Brits
can't
get
tell.
after it, man. And they love to drink.
No judgment, Well, because her friend is talking about what happened last night, but it could be that they slept in and whatnot. Regardless, though, it's like a scene that doesn't really accomplish anything other than finding out more about Hortense and where she stands in life and what her values are. And it's just a really riveting scene of dialogue between two friends having a normal meal with a drink, but the way that Leigh is able to capture these small moments that make up existence. And to some of these people, most of the people in these movies have pretty depressing lives. Perhaps this very fucking average Saturday morning brunch is like the best thing that's happened to Hortense in the last 2 weeks. You never know,
Definitely.
So I love that he just like finds time for that, and those are all the moments that eventually accumulate to give you that wallop at the end when all of the melodramatic stuff is on the table. It gives it that extra oomph that would maybe like even prevent you from buying into the melodrama if it wasn't there.
Yeah, that scene with Hortense and her friend is so great because I feel like, also, as you previously mentioned, the Hortense's adoptive mother has recently died, and I think it's like 2 months out, she said, and like you could see her kind of go through that specific stage of grief where she's not obviously, not so heavy sobbing in it, but it's still kind of weighing on her, but you could kind of see her break out of that kind of, not completely, but you could kind of see her shedding the heaviness of that grief kind of layer by layer. Like I feel like in that scene before with Leslie Manville, she might even be a little bit more in that, and then obviously getting together with your friend and talking about stuff that's like a little more innocuous, not so heavy, you really feel that human sense of kind of relief. And also, I kind of put this together right now, but we got the one night stand talk, right? And she Hortense, asks, did you use protection, use condoms? And that's something that comes up later with Cynthia and like her, daughter, her being, pretty young, her encouraging her to, use protection. And it is kind of funny given the subject matter of a baby that, an instance where Cynthia would have used condoms back in the day. And there's just a lot of condom talk. And I think that's a little bit of humor to the movie, given that, there's an adoption saga at the center of it.
Well, it's not just that. Cynthia tells Roxanne multiple times that she got stuck with her, that she was an accident, like she was clearly unfit, for that whole situation. And I just, the condom humor really is great because, first of all, it's just funny in dialogue because there's like these outdated ideas of like, no, you got to wear 2 condoms. You got to make sure you do. And it's like, pretty sure even when I was like in my first sex ed class when I was 10 years old, they were like, just make sure you only wear 1 because when you break 2, they usually break, or when you wear 2, they usually break. Regardless of that, though, like the talk of contraceptives and adoption and unwanted pregnancy runs throughout this whole movie as if it's just a fact of life, just like poverty, having a shitty job, and hating your sister-in-law, Like these are just, to these characters, that's something that I love about Mike Leigh movies, is like the circumstances of these characters never feel put upon. They are the facts of life. It never feels like these characters are entering these situations for the first time almost,
True.
That's why I love the pacing of this movie too. Like Hortense doesn't call Cynthia until an hour into the movie, the first hour exists without her reaching out. And I think that that's very smart of Leigh because he lets you just let every character have like a level 1 going through the ringer before the 2 of them meet up, and then throughout their arc as a developing friendship / mother-daughter relationship, everyone goes through the ringer one more time harder, and then they all meet together. It's a pretty simple structure. It just sometimes can maybe feel aimless to a skeptical viewer because of how long certain dialogue scenes go on, and certain scenes, and I say dialogue scenes as if there's any other type of scene in this movie. But how some scenes have no quote-unquote narrative purpose, even if like just because the thrust isn't there of a plot point, like it can mean everything as far as character.
Yeah, no, I mean the devil's in the details, and you truly need to know like these characters' lives for it to be like as impactful as it is. I think your Ozu comparison is like incredibly apt because like a lot of his filmography like works in a similar fashion. I mean, I was definitely like, there's like an emotional like kind of breaking point where like obviously I was sobbing through the reveal when Cynthia finally accepts Hortense, that like saying that she's her daughter, but like the accumulation of detail leading to like an outpouring of emotion is just like the signifying feeling I associate with Ozu. And I don't know, I think it's just like Leigh is doing throughout his creative process, like with what we've talked about with how he does these intensive rehearsals with like actors to like give the most like level of detail possible to make it believable. And I think like no part of the movie like does not feel like deeply considered from like a character perspective. And it's just I really appreciate living in that world, and I think ultimately just makes what it builds to all the more breathtaking.
The way it kind of began, I mean, it begins, with Hortense attending the funeral of her adoptive mother. But I feel like that first act of the movie, we're really just kind of seeing what these characters do and what their domestic life is like. And, you know, that's like, you know, that's pretty much life right there, right? Like there's, I guess,
You go to work and you go home.
well, yeah, there's things you do for fun, but like that's to know a person, you have to know those two things. And you know, some of my favorite scenes are kind of like stuff that Eddie was referring to, stuff that maybe doesn't necessarily advance the plot, but that's what's great is that, you know, there's not like if you wrote it all down on paper, the events that go on, it's not so much, but we just have so much time to explore them. But I guess one of those scenes, or kind of, I guess a montage you'd call it, right? I don't know. Is when, you know, I love the scenes where we see Maurice at work doing the photography, and you know, you just see a bunch of different people, you know, a lot of them kind of defined maybe that by either their profession or kind of like the family that they're with. And, you know, some of them are smiling, some of them Maurice gets to smile, some of them don't. And, you know, it's very light, and it's very comedic at certain points, but I don't know, that's just, it's just something you just get to, I guess, experience life as Maurice at his job, and kind of the pleasantry of it. And yeah, I love a good photo taking scene in any movie. I don't know, there's something about that when like people line up to pose for a picture, you know, there's a lot to that. And you know, I think the scenes here in this movie are no exception. They're really great.
Yeah, I mean, the scene where he's getting closer and closer and closer to that woman with the facial scar is incredible, and kind of reminded me of The Master, which obviously PTA has seen this. I'm pretty sure Leslie Manville, he came across through the work of Mike Leigh, if I recall correctly. But yeah, the scene in The Master, you know, where Joaquin eventually gets canned from his department store photography job when he's like putting the light closer and closer to the guy and then fighting him eventually, which is a fantastic scene. But in this one, it's like the opposite, where he's getting closer and closer, quite literally getting closer to her as a person. And, you know, like, I don't know, it's so difficult because as he defines it later on, his job is just trying to make people happy, you know? He's trying to make people smile for the camera, and his whole life is just this exhausting parade of trying to please people. And that's why his plea at the end is, why can't we just share our suffering? Because shit, man, that guy's got to be suffering from all the happiness he's trying to bring others. Yeah, it's a great character.
Yeah, I just really love his perspective. Again, hitting another like Ozu beat with the intergenerational aspect of it. The richness of the details. You never, like, both of Cynthia and Maurice's parents are dead by the time the story begins. So you only get like details about them through conversations. You get kind of this idea that like there was this contentious relationship that Cynthia might have had with them. Obviously, she brings it up in the fight at the end that she feels as though like the marriage with Maurice and what is his wife's
Monica.
Her like that Monica was kind of driving them apart. You get that understanding there, but ultimately Maurice's, I don't want to say outburst, but like when he comes sort of to pick up the pieces there, pleading for everyone to like sort of let out their misery, it feels very much like reckoning with the previous generation, like burying the emotional weight. And it's just like, nah, man, we just gotta, like, everyone's going through this shit. We gotta talk it out. And I think that's just like, again, such a fresh thing. Like it like makes sense from a character perspective, but also just like adds so much like intergenerationally, where I feel like there is like, especially like post like 60s when they grew up, I feel like there's this liberalization there of like talking about their feelings, and he has been hiding it so much himself that's like, fuck, we gotta let it out.
Yeah, I think that's what is so kind of fresh about his character, you know, because I know people like this in real life, but I don't know, I feel like I don't see it cinematically depicted so often, of kind of like, yeah, like this, you know, paternal role figure that's not like overtly like I guess like, he's not like super like masculine or like, trying to lay down the hammer of the household or something like that. He actually, is kind of like the binding force that, keeps the family unit together, but kind of, thanklessly, or because, everyone else is not really putting in that work to communicate with each other. So he's got to set up the barbecue and do all that. And it's just, you could just tell that's such a heavy weight to be on his shoulders, especially, him kind of being the successful one in the family and kind of people looking to him and kind of the tension that creates with his sister. And on the reverse side, just you could really just feel kind of the shame, that Cynthia feels that kind of makes her, such a kind of frazzled character. And, maybe when, I don't want to speak for Eddie, but maybe when, Eddie was watching the movie when he was 19 and, he's seen the Cynthia character, she's like, oh, this Cynthia's a little bit annoying, you know what I mean? Maybe a little bit, or just a little bit hard a little bit overwhelming to presence to be in. But I think that's what's so great about the movie is, Leigh kind of really deeply interrogates, where that comes from. And, it's all unpacked by the characters at the end in that great final scene.
I mean, the performance by Brenda Blythen of Cynthia is fantastic, and it really recalls like an older mode of performance to me. It's notable that they talk when her and Hortense are opening up to each other. They ask each other what type of man they like in movie star terms, and she says Marlon Brando. She really does have a bit of that old school flair, like a bit of classic era stuff, but with that realism of the Brando era seeping into it, because she kind of reminded me of Shirley MacLaine, but with a little bit of that edging into New Hollywood, whether it's method or just any other kind of style of realism centered acting. And by the way, that scene also sees Marianne Jean-Baptiste do a Stallone impersonation that's purely facial that I found very funny. I don't know how accurate it is as a Stallone impersonation, but she makes a lot of funny faces, her character, and that's one of them.
Just the fact that Stallone is impersonated and mentioned in this movie just feels kind of touching to me. Maybe a nod to the American viewers, trying to make references for us to keep us entertained.
I was trying to think of that. I was just like, what Stallone movie is Hortense watching? Like, in her alone time, she's not watching TV even. That's another difference is the cramped house where Cynthia lives there, where her parents used to live with her and where her daughter lives. They always got the TV on, whether it's playing music, like some sort of variety show music or a tennis match or something like that. And Hortense always got a novel, always got the book, she's just sitting around reading the book. She's not watching TV. Just a little character difference to build out their contrast even further and to complicate people's perceptions as well of what was to become of someone who was given away, by this teenage mother. And yeah, I just find that their scenes together after that long take in the diner, which is, as I said, just like a tour de force of acting from both actors there, Brenda Blythen and Marianne Jean-Baptiste. But the more they like get to know each other in this like cheeky way of her sneaking around her kids because she's embarrassed about it is so endearing and charming. And I just love that, like, again, it's something you don't see in movies like this where it's like a mother-daughter rekindling friendship is what carries the narrative momentum for like close to the back 45 minutes of this movie before, like the 45 minutes of this movie before the climax, and it's just not like the feeling of a movie you usually associate with. And I love that. And I love how discreet and separate the barbecue set pieces from the rest of the film as well, and how hilarious that shot is of the table setting when Monica's complaining about how there's too many people now, and you have like 7 chairs at this tiny table that 3 people could barely fit at. And eventually when they're eating there, like there's never a moment where everyone's sitting down. Like 2 people are always standing up because of how tiny the table is. And it just adds so much tension to that scene where Morris is just like walking back and forth from the grill, dropping shit at the table, and Cynthia cannot stand still. She's getting everyone's salad going back and forth and everything, and Hortense is trying to be normal, and Monica's not even trying to do this but is poking holes in their lies, and it's just such a intense and yet calm scene, that is also kicked off by about 2 minutes of a long take of people just eating and saying like, pass this, pass that, can I have this? Like all of the dialogue is directly related to the plating of food for
the English cookout.
Yeah, I want to say longer than 2 minutes. It's like a big chunk.
It did. The concept of the English barbecue, again, it's something obviously that has like, it's fine, like whatever. It would certainly like, and you can grill anywhere, but it was just making me laugh so much.
I was thinking that too. I was like, they have barbecues over there? I didn't even know that was going on over there.
Well, when he brings up the meat,
he's slapping
like
down meat in like a bowl in the middle.
Yeah. He's like, I got burgers and bangers, and so he means like burger patties and sausages, but like there are no buns in sight, So I think they're just eating hamburger patties as if they were steaks or whatever. And then there's also like one steak that gets dropped on the Roxana's boyfriend's plate that's just comically sized. The cookout is a hilarious and insane scene that turns very sad and affecting very quickly, like on a dime, as it implodes once they go inside. And it's just like, I don't know, man. The having it all out moment is such a risky proposition for family melodramas like this. But when it lands like this, like Ozu, like James L. Brooks, it's some of the most powerful shit you can get in cinema. And this climax is one of those moments. I mean, when Cynthia, who is an unfit mother of 2, finally is embraced and embraces Monica, the one who can't have any children. And it's like, if you put that on paper, it's like, yeah, so they all just kind of have like a group hug. like if you're like removed from it, it's like, that's whack. Like, what the fuck? But it's incredible. It's a cheeky, ironic welcome to the family moment that is just so demented. That's just like, Marianne Jean-Baptiste early in the film tells her friend, you choose your parents. And in this moment, she chooses to go back to her completely dysfunctional birth family that gave her up, because when her adopted parents are dead, who else do you turn to? And it's about the importance of having someone like that. And at least in Hortense's perspective, she just chooses the person to have as that parental figure. And, as trying of a character as Cynthia is, as wacky and goofy of an old bat as she is, Hortense finds the patience in herself for her, because she knows that this relationship could be special. And I find it to be so deeply moving, man. This is a movie that gets better the more I talk about it. Like, I finished it and I was like, yeah, that was really sweet. That was really nice. I wasn't crying, but I was like, that was really sweet. That was really nice. There was one part that almost got me there, when Cynthia has her breakdown and is giving Maurice the business for not coming by enough, the familial guilt of not showing up enough is, oh boy, is that way on me. But like, even in like the 4 hours since I've watched this movie, like it has just sank into my stomach so hard. And it's so funny that I finished this movie and was just so overwhelmed with emotions that were so complicated but like so human and so just like overall positive and overall just like earnest the earnesty of family melodrama had carried me out of that screening at home. And then I opened up my laptop and I see Charlie Kirk's neck get turned into a fire hydrant. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, that shit's crazy. Like the whiplash of that. And then just like a million people making fun of it too. And it's like, whatever. I'm not commenting on that. But like, it was just the tonal whiplash of that was so insane. I had to just shut the laptop and go back to thinking about this movie for a while.
You're like, damn, this is like a riddle for humanity that I can't figure out. Like, this is too complex. Like, this says something kind of deep, but it's like there's almost too much to explore.
I'm gonna go 4.5 bullets on this one. It is approaching perfection, and I think Mike Leigh might have a 5 in him, even if it's in a rewatch of one that I've already 4 or 4.5. I've completely joined the bandwagon, even if I don't know about certain periods of his work seem more fallow than others, more fruitful than others, or some more fruitful than others. But hey, man, consider me a fan. 4.5. Malcolm, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 4 bullets. There's just so much to appreciate here, and like it is like just a tour de force of acting. I mean, the performances from kind of the 3 leads here are just so good, and so, you know, maybe definitely thanks to the process that Leigh goes through, and just kind of the space he gives them narratively, just to, I don't know, have such a variety of emotions, even beyond the acting. Like I think like the production design is so great and so integral to what the movie's doing. You know, as Eddie was referring to, we kind of have like Cynthia's, you know, apartment that's falling apart, very messy, and, you know, Hortense's is very, very clean, very nice, and then Maurice's, you know, with the aspect of, you know, his wife, you know, really pouring a lot into the homemaking, you know, and that's a big aspect. I mean, one of the great intro scenes is when, or not intro scenes, but at the beginning of the movie, towards the beginning of the movie, you know, Maurice coming home from work and she's vacuuming right at the door. You know, he wants the kiss, wants the come home kiss, and, you know, doesn't quite get it there. It's just not, you know, not being sensitive to the vacuuming going on. And, you know, you mentioning the Ozu stuff, I feel like there's a couple of shots that's very specific to, you know, the like living in an apartment that kind of reminds me. Now, this is a whole nother thing that I saw some article that I didn't read, and I don't know if this is true, I just know that this exists, that the Ozu shot that's kind of like lower, like a lot of people think that's like supposed to represent, or not represent, you know, but it's supposed to like put it at like a level where, you know, in like the Japanese homes back then, they would like sit low on the ground without a chair. Someone's saying that's not the case. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like it's with this movie, there's like a couple of shots that are kind of like from the stairwell, and it kind of mimics the feeling of like being a kid and like seeing like your parents argue downstairs. And I think in both of those scenes, we're seeing kind of some sort of conflict, some sort of, if not an argument, you know, a kind of a heavy conversation. And, you know, just visually, those were some of the like more moving moments of the movie for me. And I think I mentioned it before, but I do love, like, I feel like a lot of these conversations take place right next to, you know, some like morning level sunlight. And I you know, maybe because that scene where Hortense and her friend kind of drink and have like lunch, you're definitely right. That definitely feels like some sunrise kind of sunshine shining through there. But maybe it's kind of like, you know, like Days of Heaven. They always shot it during golden hour. Maybe Mike Leigh and Dick Pope were like, for these conversation scenes, we got to shoot these 7 a.m., 8 a.m. We need that morning sunlight. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I like Naked too, but I feel like this one, I don't know. Maybe it's just Naked's asking something a lot more difficult of the viewer. like this is a little bit something that, I don't know, my brain can comprehend, with just kind of well executed melodrama with really rich performances.
JT, any final thoughts and a rating?
Yeah, I'm going 4.5 bullets. This was amazing. I really, really loved it. Again, just directly comparing it to Naked as the outlier of his filmography, if this is more akin to the types of films he generally makes. Not to say I didn't enjoy Naked, but like I really, really fuck with this. And I think I've been watching a lot of PTA, one for the podcast, but also just like in general this year. I feel like I've wound up, because the new one's coming out, like not really intentionally, but I showed my girlfriend Licorice Pizza, and just the point of comparison being like with later career PTA having these kinds of like long takes that are really like unpretentious and are just like kind of letting like the actors like work out a scene, like playing like scenes like that in these long takes. I think I love it so much because I mean, when I feel like in like easy, just like early film studies stuff, like people are just blowing ropes over the crazy long take through like where you're doing the long take tracking shot, that kind of thing. That's like insane. But I think more like obviously like that's like those types of long takes are incredibly impressive. But like the faith in your own ability as a director and the faith required of you like to put in your actors, I think is just like incredibly impressive. And yeah, I don't know, I just felt that watching this, just it's someone who's like making films that are like simple in that respect and kind of stripped down. I think it's incredibly difficult to have the confidence to do that as an artist, and it requires a great faith in your collaborators. And the fact that Leigh works with a lot of the same collaborators, I imagine there's like such a deep level of trust there, and that makes just all the emotions felt in the movie just all the more impactful.
All right. Well,
wait, one more comment. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention this. Timothy Spall's outfit during the barbecue scene, like the barbecue, you know, the shorts and the shirt, like I feel like that makes that scene even much more like emotionally devastating when they really have to get into like, you know, the thickness of their problems. Just, I don't know, just wearing like a summer fun-loving kind of outfit, but having to get into deep family issues. I love that contrast.
Yeah, that is going to do it on Secrets and Lies. Before we wrap up, you know, I've enjoyed spending some time here with Mike Leigh. And before we do this segment, actually, I want to say, please email us at extendedclippodcast@gmail.com. Any questions on there, you write them, I'll read them on the air and answer them. Anyway, you know, I've enjoyed our sojourn over the UK, you know, hanging out with Joe, talking about Naked, talking about Secrets and Lies, just being a right proper fit lad. Gonna fire up some FIFA later tonight, you know, get some proper scran. So, to continue the recurring segment of me opening up trading cards, I am going to open up this pack of Beatles trading cards that were made in the 1990s. They, from the packs that I got, if you guys can see it decent, right? Yeah. It's all like 60s era pictures of them on the front. So I'm interested in seeing, you know, what we got inside. Now,
yeah, I'm hoping for a later Paul in the pack. That would be pretty nice.
I was gonna ask you guys if like what kind of era Beatles you guys like best, and JT just answered it. I remember. Well, I'm gonna answer for you, JT, because it's a fun story. After Licorice Pizza came out, I think there was a lot of Paul McCartney being played in our townhouse that we lived in because of the Let Me Roll It needle drop, perhaps. And I remember being in the kitchen cooking dinner while JT was in the shower in the bathroom right next to the kitchen, listening to Band on the Run in full while in the shower on a speaker, and hearing that album and hearing JT sing along during what's that song, like Mrs. Henderson or something?
Mrs. Vanderbilt, I think.
Yeah,
this is such an embarrassing story.
Just like not hearing him sing the whole time, but then hearing the ho, hey oh, oh. It just tickled me so deeply. Well, because like I was listening to a podcast or something, but then I heard like some good jams bleeding in, and I was like, I'll just listen to a shower muffled version of Band on the Run. I love that record.
And it came with a live performance.
Anyway, JT, any favorite Beatles records?
In terms of like them all together, I generally trend earlier. I'd say my favorite is Revolver overall, but
Yeah.
I like, I mean, not controversial to say I like it all, but generally I'm listening to the earlier poppier stuff, and then Revolver is my favorite.
Wow. Malcolm?
I feel like I need to revisit the Beatles again, because I feel like I definitely have listened to all the albums, but like I feel like the one I listened to the most was the White Album, and like I think it kind of coincided with, you know, me kind of like getting pretentious, like getting into art, and like that was like the one that was the like quote unquote the deepest, or had like hidden messages in it. You know, I feel like I've been trying to explore a lot of their solo work because I was just less familiar with that, and I feel like I've listened to All Things Must Pass, right? Like that's the George Harrison.
Yeah, it's classic.
That one gets a lot of play for me.
Yeah. On a recent Best show, Adam Friedland was on, and Tom compared Come Town to the Beatles, which I was very surprised by, and said that the Adam Friedland show is his All Things Must Pass. He said Nick was the angry John Lennon type, and Stav is lovable Paul McCartney, and Adam was waiting in the back in the shadows as George Harrison.
There's something
drop
to
his
that.
All Things Must Pass.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. Yeah.
The first card I opened was just a picture of John and Paul with their manager, or their producer rather, in the studio at a piano, and it said the Beatles on stage, but they weren't on stage. They were in the studio. The second one, though, is an album card, and it's for one of my dark horse contenders for a favorite Beatles record, their final released record, Let It Be. Despite the fact that Abbey Road was recorded later and this was kind of just compiled, the Let It Be sessions are, you know, very fruitful, as you may know from the Peter Jackson extension of the Lindsay Michael Hogg documentary that's on Disney Plus. It just has a lot of awesome songs that feel like what those guys are going to do solo in the 70s, plus where rock is going to go in the 70s, or at least more interesting artsy rock is going to go in the 70s. Like there's a lot of Bowie, you know, in this, I would say. And I mean Bowie covers across the universe. Favorite song on Let It Be? I don't know, man. It's really hard for me because I love Dig a Pony, Across the Universe, I, Me, Mine, and I've Got a Feeling, and The Long and Winding Road. Like, those are all perfect songs to me. I'll even give it up for the 50-second long Dig It. I love that one. What about you guys? Any Let It Be thoughts?
Not off the top of my dome, no. It's been a minute.
Sorry, the back of this card is just killing me. This one's just like a picture of them in Paris. And the title of this one just says Off Stage, but the description is as follows. One of the craziest first sentences on the back of a trading card I've ever seen. Hitler came to Paris and strutted around after the surrender of the great city. Then, as Europe was being liberated by Allied forces, General de Gaulle marched through the famous streets of as the leader of the Free French. in their days of a different glory, the Beatles strode away from the Arc de Triomphe. Most cities fell to them in due course, and though less excited than some, Paris was not an exception. So basically, they're saying that the Beatles could have defeated Hitler, but were too late, perhaps? One can never know.
That really, I don't get why Hitler was mentioned at all on that trading card. I don't really.
Well, it's to compare them to de Gaulle after they kicked the Nazis out, and he walked through the same streets as them by the Arc de Triomphe.
They're hitting a similar stride. They got a similar strut.
Here we see, I don't even know what this is. Oh yeah, okay. This is a London performance of George and John on stage. Paul was seen as the cute. Paul was known as the cute one, but hey, my eyes are on George. I don't know why I said that. Just treating it like one of those old school fan shows, There was this radio show that used to be on the local classic rock station, and I think switched to public radio maybe. And I'm sure it's a concept that's all over town, or all over the U.S. But the L.A. version of it, of Breakfast with the Beatles, used to be on 95.5, where on, I believe, Saturday mornings, maybe Sundays, it was just all Beatles from like 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. And, the DJ was dropping fun facts and stuff like that. Here's an album card for one of their better early albums, I would say. If you're dividing the discography from, I would say Rubber Soul is probably the last early album, maybe, or is it the first late album? I'll say it's the last early album. A top 3 early album, Help. Great record. You guys a fan of Help?
I need to revisit.
Yeah, no, I fuck with Help. Yeah.
This is probably boring, right? Or are you guys enjoying this? I like this as a segue to just talk about the lads.
The cards. I just wish I had more Beatles opinions to have, other than I like them.
Because I don't.
I mean,
remember.
Help's got one of the best. Yeah.
No,
you don't remember what songs are on what album?
Yeah, it's hard. Like I don't have the intimate Beatles knowledge like that. But I was just put on to a Beatles conspiracy theory. Maybe you've heard this before, that Paul died around like Abbey Road, and the signifier is that he's barefoot on the Abbey Road.
Wait, you just heard about the conspiracy?
I never heard of this. Someone put me on to this.
Who told you?
I've actually never heard of this.
It was actually another guy named Eddie who told me this.
Like Ticket to Ride. Come on. Ticket to Ride's one of the best songs ever written. Like, come on. It's Ticket to Ride, guys.
That's a great song.
Here's Hitler.
Hitler?
No, just kidding. It's Ringo. Ringo in A Hard Day's Night.
Nice.
My dad always used to say Ringo was his favorite Beatle, which I found to be a bit trollish, and maybe it was where I got some of my iconoclastic hot habits from. Here's the guys getting off the plane, that iconic landing. This is what it's going to be like when JT and Nico land in LA. Shoot Crazy Feeling for a weekend. But hey, one day fans will greet us at the airport. More of them off stage. These cards are, this is more of a me thing, I think. I think we're going to wrap it up here. These are just all them hanging out off stage.
Yeah, no, the cards, honestly, this pack is a little disappointing. I want more intimate pictures.
Yeah, these pictures are pretty, PR approved. We need them having a wank off. Remember that?
Yeah, or something more of a concept to the photos.
Autographs, that's like the most PR thing ever. It's like, oh, while you're signing them, can we just take a picture of you? But I like getting the album cards. I don't like it as much. I wish I just got a Ringo card, that had his stats on it. I wish that was the format of these cards.
Well, with the Beatles, you run out of cards pretty quickly.
Little Richard.
I know, but
you have to go to a lot of second string.
Okay, so
players.
I'm trying to get a Help era Ringo in this pack, and a Hard Day's Night era Paul in the next pack, and a Let It Be era John in the next. I'm just saying, let me direct the cards. I want to be a trading card creative director and writer. Is that okay? Is that too much to ask?
You're allowed to ask that for sure.
All right, join the Patreon, everybody. I promise I won't use the Patreon money for cards. That was such a flop of a segment. We're definitely not doing that again. But it's a fun gift for like in studio guests. You know,
Totally.
No, I think cards work better when at least one of us is in studio with you. I think
it would be funny if we were doing this on the phone with no webcam, just describing it to you guys. But that is what the listeners are getting. So, goodbye, everybody.